Good evening. Our encounters tonight include a look at the phantom plains of the Peak District. That's a little later. Ever since the first photograph was taken, researchers have tried to capture the ultimate image, the paranormal on film. The invention of camcorders has stepped up the search. Every couple of weeks or so, a new video clip generates a fresh wave of excitement. After all, the camera doesn't lie. Or does it? Tonight, we examine evidence of the paranormal captured on camera. Pictures that can be explained and those that can't.
On this unknown aircraft, P1 control doesn't know what type of aircraft it is either.
Flying saucers, ghouls and phantoms. Fact or fiction? Will we ever be sure? One thing is certain, this is a fake. 60 years after this picture of the Loch Ness Monster was taken, one of the team behind it admitted it was a hoax. Nothing more than a model monster powered by a toy submarine. These pictures convinced and baffled a generation after World War I. The so-called Cottingley fairies had even persuaded Sherlock Holmes author Arthur Conan Doyle. But 65 years later, Elsie Hill, one of the two cousins who took the pictures, finally admitted it was all a fake. These types of hoaxes come as no surprise to the founder of this magazine, who's made a career out of debunking paranormal stories.
These are classic cases of things that have deceived people. When we look at them today with now decades of experience of looking at photographs and special effects on movie screens, they look very fake.
In my experience, I've never actually seen either a paranormal picture or ghostly image that's not been faked or worked on. If you take the Cottingley fairies, you have the young lady looking at a fairy. Although her eyes are actually quite far away, you have a mismatch of focus. The fairy is very close to her, yet she's looking far away.
So just how easy is it to mock up a convincing photo? Student photographer Ian Lott took these pictures. A UFO over Worcestershire. Ian's photos began as two paper plates simply wrapped together in silver foil and suspended from cotton. He photographed that and in the darkroom superimposed the image onto a background of open countryside. The result, a passable image of a flying saucer.
The thing that happens if you have researchers who really, really want to believe in something is that they can be inclined to see what they want to see rather than what's actually there.
This looks like a flying saucer and fooled many until the photographer admitted it was nothing more than a car hubcap. So how do you tell whether a picture has been faked?
If you look at any image, it's quite possible to pick up telltale signs such as eyes not focusing, such as different contrast levels, such as different lighting techniques.
Paranormal researchers have also pointed to photographs, such as this one taken in Raynham Hall, Norfolk, as evidence that ghosts exist.
I love this photograph. I think it's a great photograph. There are so many techniques for double exposures and everything else that it's really hard to take it seriously as a genuine photograph of a ghost.
Here's another ghostly apparition, but this is another of Ian Lott's fakes.
All I done was just take a picture of somebody walking down the stairs, then reshot the same photograph without the person on the stairs, and it actually gave them a translucent image.
This picture caused a storm when it was published. Does it show the ghost of a young girl pictured in the burnt remnants of Wem Town Hall in Shropshire?
The image of the young lady standing on the balcony, you can quite clearly see on the midriff, on the shoulders, through her arms, there has been a double density, almost the image coming through the bars, which is typically where you would lay one image on another. And all these things point to, certainly in the Wem pictures, that there has been possibly some double image or double exposing, which gives it that impression of a ghostly image.
Writer and photographer Robert Irving produced this photograph only to find it the center of worldwide stories about aliens landing on Earth. Robert created the picture to illustrate an article he was writing for Fortean Times about an Italian UFO scare.
As soon as the article came out, the Italian media jumped on it, basically, and published it, portrayed it as genuine. A photograph of a UFO in a hangar seemed to be exactly what they needed.
The whole thing was so easy to do. Robert created his photograph on a computer. Modern programs allow you to manipulate any image.
The scope of these things is unlimited. Anything can be done. The only limits are the imagination, really. Basically, I just took a lot of care recreating the struts in front of the flying saucer. It gave it an added extra realism.
Trick photography is nothing new, and there are many reasons why people go to such lengths to fake photographs.
I figured that we could all do with a photograph of a UFO in a hangar, and I did it for fun.
But what about photographs that are genuine but simply misleading? For example, this one, apparently of a UFO.
To me, this is a great example of a picture that was not taken in order to deceive anybody, but is extremely deceptive.
In fact, the US government released the image to show how easily people can misinterpret what they see in the sky. Actually, it's a B-36 bomber taken from an unusual angle.
The belief that the camera never lies is completely wrong, and photographers have always known this.
Moving images present the same difficulties. Is this a UFO, or is there a more mundane explanation?
It's quite common that you'll get an effect of a light appearing in the lens, sort of hanging in the sky. This can look like a square or diamond shape, or even a pentagon. That's actually caused by stray light coming into the lens and being reflected off the internal surfaces of the lenses, and you get a mirror image inside the lens of the lens iris unit. And in effect, you're seeing something that isn't really there.
Objects apparently moving of their own free will, filmed from the space shuttle, caused excitement among UFO researchers. But in fact, they could be explained away as shuttle debris and waste being ejected into orbit. And what about this picture, apparently of a face in Mars, taken by a NASA space probe? Is it a natural formation or something built by a race of Martians? The idea that human beings have a large primate cousin was given extra credence with this film of the creature known as Bigfoot, taken in North America. But what do scientists think?
I first saw that clip about 30 years ago, and I thought it was a hoax then, and I think it's a hoax now. It looks very much to me like a man in a monkey suit. The limb proportions and body shape are entirely human. The gait is human with a few exaggerations, a bit of extra arm swinging and so on. The most convincing thing was the way that the coat ripples. The coat is not attached, as it were, to the underlying flesh.
And what about this? Is the idea of a flying saucer over Manhattan just too strange to be true?
I really think if there were a flying saucer barreling around Manhattan, first of all, the comedian David Letterman would be out getting it on his show. Second of all those tourists on the Empire State Building would be taking lots of pictures of it. It's just hard for me to believe that in a city the size and never sleep character of New York, it would be hidden.
But there are some items that still intrigue and baffle once hoaxes, photographic mishaps and anomalies are ruled out. This photograph of a Navy unit taken in 1919, for example. Despite extensive analysis, no one has come up with an explanation for the presence of the apparition in the back row, a former member of the unit who had been killed 3 days earlier.
When I first saw this photograph, I assumed it was a fake. In the back row, the chap fourth from the left, looking over his left shoulder, there's the ghostly face of a naval mechanic, Freddie Jackson, who'd been killed in an accident some 3 days earlier on the base. He'd walked into a propeller. The photographer, as far as I know, wouldn't have been aware of this accident.
Make up your own mind about these UFOs filmed in Las Vegas by Englishman Ray Wardle.
For some reason I went up onto the roof of the garage at work and started filming what I thought was probably 2 planes coming into land, until one dived very, very fast towards the ground. Then some minutes later, a third one comes along, which is probably 2 to 3 times the size. These 2 objects which are floating around, they seem to lock onto it. A few minutes after that, there was an aeroplane going into land at McCarran Airport. So now we know that these aren't airplanes. I've had it analyzed, and nobody has come up with any logical explanation of what it is. I've had people suggest that it's a hoax. Well, if it is, I didn't hoax it.
unknown object, aircraft some type. One, it appears to be going outbound real slow. There's hardly any range velocity.
But perhaps the most remarkable UFO footage to surface in recent years comes from an official source, the United States Air Force. These pictures were taken in the sky above the top-secret Nellis Air Base by the Air Force's own cameras. The footage has undergone rigorous examination and continues to baffle the experts.
I'm familiar with footage taken by these kinds of cameras at this test range, and it does look extremely authentic, so I think a fake or a hoax is unlikely. What's interesting is the reaction of the observers you can hear in the background here.
Where did it come from? Way down. On this unknown aircraft. P1 control doesn't know what type of aircraft it is either.
These people are used to seeing hundreds of aeroplanes cross this test range every day. They know all about military jets, yet what they're seeing clearly baffles them. And when you look at some of the data that's scrolling in the screen, you can tell, for instance, it's hopping about all over the place. It's staying stationary. It then moves off very fast. It's doing things that no normal aeroplane would do. So it's pretty baffling. It is, in the strictest sense of the word, an unidentified flying object.
We don't know what it is. That doesn't mean we can't know what it is, and it doesn't mean that people who study it can't find out what it is, and it doesn't mean that there's no natural explanation. It just means that it's unidentified.
The US military refuses to comment on that footage, which was said to have been secretly smuggled out of the base. Until they do, or someone else comes up with a plausible explanation, this will remain one of the most intriguing mysteries in the files of unexplained images. After the break, the phantom planes of the Derbyshire Peaks.